So this is us. This is actually in this room. And so we started thinking about, well, there was a problem, there was an opportunity, and you can maybe just kind of skip ahead. But, what was the solution? So if you take a look at the site itself, this is where this group of people, this pressing problem, and this rich data set all came together. So this is what the live website looks like. And you notice the first thing you see here, you scroll down just a little bit, is that you see a list of schools. Okay, one of the things that you don't see is a map of the city of Chicago marking out where all these schools are. And that was purposeful. One of the things that we thought it was critical to do was get very specific about who our audience was going to be. And we said that we wanted to design this for the parent of a child whose school was closed, and really design the website and present the information from their perspective. And with that in mind, we wanted to make it a very localized experience. So if we could click on maybe one of the closings, so you can actually filter by the different type of action being taken, and if you could just pick one of those to click on. So for a parent at Bethune, we start out by showing them their neighborhood. So this is something that they would be familiar with. The dot in the middle shows their school. In this case, it's being slated for closure. The two blue pointers signify where children are being asked to go. So this gives them their map. You can see additional information about each of the different schools involved, and some of the other dots show other schools that are in the area. So right there, you get a localized perspective of what that parent's options are and what new routes they might need to consider in order to get their child to school. If you go a little bit further down, again, looking at this from the perspective of a parent, we start first with what's on the left. Why is my kid's school on the list? And so what we wanted to show was the information that CPS was using in making this decision. They have a utilization metric that they use. So according to the CPS calculation, this school was 48% utilized. And they also have a performance level, 1 through 3, and this was considered a level 3 school, which is the lowest performing school. And the other thing we want to do, again, taking it from the perspective of a parent, was to say, well, what else do we know about the school, and what else can we say about the school? And it led to questions like this. How good is this school? Does student performance improve over time? And here we show ISAT scores for a single cohort. So that was our best proxy of saying, given you have a group of third graders and they're tested continuously until 8th grade, what's going on with their coursework? And then if you scroll down just a little bit further, there were other questions that we just sought to ask. Well, how organized is the school? Does the school have the things that are necessary to make an effective school experience? This is data that's collected on a yearly basis by the University of Chicago. Scroll a little bit further down. Some of the other questions. How many things has this school been through? There was a lot of frustration around, well, they've already swapped this school, they've already swapped out the leadership. And so this information is information about the probation status for school, and also the mobility rate trend that shows how stable is the population. And then finally at the bottom, the enrollment trend, understanding over the last 10, 12 years, what's enrollment been like for this school. And so finally, what we also want to do here is that if you go to the compare these schools, so we want to provide all the information from a localized perspective, but then we also want to give parents the ability to compare one school to the proposed school. So you have this side-by-side comparison where you can see the school that's being slated for closure on the left, and then you can see the alternatives to the right. And you're able to sort of look directly and clearly see, using all the data that we had available, get an understanding for, well, okay, is this going to be a better school, is it not? And then parents would have the tools so they could advocate as needed.
So it's been exactly 2 months since we launched the first version of the site, and since then, we've had about 8,000 unique visitors, 42,000 page views, and hopefully all along the way, what our users have seen is a polished product. But getting there took a lot of hard work. A lot of long hours, a lot of discussions. Can we use this data? Is this data really accurate? Are we portraying it the right way? Do we appear this way? Are we appearing pro-closings, anti-closings? So what may look like it was just, we knew what we were doing and we made it happen. It was a lot of process. There was many nights till 6 in the morning. And there's really no shortcuts. We had powerful technology at our disposal, but technology can only get you so far. So we had to really take a deep dive into the situation. We did some old-fashioned reading dense documents, following news stories, meeting with people, talking to them. Some of the stuff that you don't really want to do once you're in your chair behind your computer, but you gotta, and we had to go out there. Either some of that's what we've been doing for months, or it's what we were going to do once we started on this project. And so you can even see there was a lot of steps we went through, from the chicken scratch on the first design all the way through to, okay, we think we're going to show it this way, and finally where we are now. Some of the things we've added along the way is being able to see a print view of the site, so parents can print a copy of the information for their school. So when they go into their hearings and they're saying, but wait a minute, my ISAT score is this, or my performance is better than this school's performance, so they can have that reference. Compare functionality came later. So Josh was able to, and at one point Josh requested the attendance boundaries that were going to be proposed. So an attendance boundary, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that, but it's, if you live within a boundary, those are schools that you're guaranteed a seat at. And so with all these changes, all these boundaries are going to change as well. So Josh requested that, he got it, and I think within 15 minutes or within that same night, it was up on the site. So it's a lot of being on Twitter or being on top of this so you can respond quickly to various changes. We just on Friday released a Spanish language version, so you can see it in Spanish. It's not perfect, but we had a group donate Spanish to Spanish translation to us. And throughout this process, we learned a lot about school closings. Some of us came into this knowing every single data detail, and some of us have been following education generally in Chicago, but didn't know specifically about this. But we learned a lot, and when you dive into the data, you find a lot of interesting things. And there are some stuff that we couldn't fit into the site without overwhelming people. Some of it's in the category of data junkie information, that is really interesting to us, but a parent's going to say, cohort, what? Value added, what are you talking about? So we shipped that to the blog, and that's where we could talk about some of the more complex and nuanced issues, like how CPS is defining a better category in schools.
So getting there was difficult, and we had a couple of challenges and solutions, and I want to talk about that. So school closing, very contentious, and even like some of when you get into it, even as we were not exactly sure how we were all kind of like in that position, like whether somebody was for or against closing. I remember at one point, we had a form of it on the site, and I said, wait a minute, are we helping CPS close schools? And then somebody checks me and says, well, if the data shows that, so there was all this kind of like challenges with working as a team, because most of us didn't really know each other, or we knew each other, but we've never worked together in this capacity. So that's one. We had some of us we had different points of view, which we addressed by making sure that we always had a frame, which is the data. As long as we were true to what the data was showing, even though we had maybe differing points of view with what we wanted to say, we could all come together to what we want the site to bring to our audience. Another one is there was really a tremendous amount of data on this project, and one of the biggest challenges, particularly in the beginning, was just even deciding what to say. And in fact, that was the solution, was that there was so much to look at. We could have just focused on utilization, we could have just focused on mobility, we could just have focused on performance level. But as soon as what really I think made a difference was when we all sat down and had framed this question based on an audience, which is, what does a CPS parent want to know? And based on that, we had a list of questions that Nathan had written down based on what he heard from all this discussion. And based on that, we looked at, okay, what data would answer that question? As soon as we had a frame for the data that we had, I felt like things really started to shape fairly quickly. This was also very true particularly for the designers, because even for us, we went to Hack Night, we knew that all this data existed. We went back to the office and talked with Paul and Nate, And Paul and Nick, who were the designers of the site, said, hold on a second, what do you want to say? Like, let's just look at it from one school. And so, like, as soon as we said, let's frame it for a parent, let's look at it one school at a time, things started to really shape up very quickly. Another problem that we had was we had a very, very straight urgent timeline. By the time we met, the final school closing was about to be announced in 3 weeks.
Oh,
When we met, about 3 weeks. 4 weeks.
Yes, yeah, it was through.
So we had
it
a
was
very
24 days.
Yeah, we had a very short time to actually put this together. In fact, I wasn't really short. And in fact, and that's also one challenge. The other challenge that I don't know, was I wanted to do, for the hack night, I wanted to do something kind of cheesy and quick. You know, because the hack night was, for me, like because it's easy to do that. It's easy to just say, oh, let's just put something in it. Which is great, really. And I feel like we, as a group, for the hack nights have really, this, for me, has really shown the maturity of a hack night. Because I think a year ago, that would have been like the most exciting thing to just put something in a map. And now it's kind of like old news for us, which is great because now we're really starting to say, what will that do? You know, putting something in the map is very useful, but what does it answer? And now we're really starting to really dig into that. So now we're really using technology to solve the problem in a way that's not just because it's fun for us, but because it really has some end use. There was also a lot of complexity, which, like I said, but we were very fortunate to have very good design. Because I think, you know, as a programmer, you know, my approach is to always look at it like, oh, you know, I can show that in the table. But, you know, if you really have a good design, it will tell you, well, maybe a table is not necessarily the best way to go. And so somebody whose expertise is kind of like really having that has that expertise in providing a user experience is something very useful and was key for us. Another challenge that we had, can I just go back to urgent timeline? The other one is because we had a very urgent timeline, we had to use the simplest things that could possibly work. And this was really very interesting for me to see. So for one thing, we decided to always use Google tools. So we used Google Docs for everything. We shared, we used, at one point, all of the data was in a Google spreadsheet, and you could see 5, 6 people entering data at the same time. Like, you know, like, when we were finalizing we were collecting all of the data at that point. We used Google Fusion tables for the maps. We could have, we used Ruby Rails, and it's a we used it in I feel a very simple but effective way. We used reusable import scripts that we could parlay to other people. So like once we developed a script for how to import one set of data and put it into, like, let's say a graph, if there was a graph for it, or put it into a table if there was a table for it. Once we had that for one, what we did was we then split up all of the data sets and said, okay, Josh, you're going to do mobility, LNS is going to do enrollment, I was going to do this. And as we added new data sets, we had this process. We just say, here's put it on this common shared spreadsheet, write a rake script for it, and write the migration script for it. And that was really fun and interesting for me to see. We used Heroku for the deployment. We tried to be really smart about it because we knew that it was high impact. We load tested it before we released it. And when we knew that we couldn't handle the load, we added, you know, worker process. You know, we added some server power to make sure that we could address it. The last probably challenge for us is that we're not all in the same location. There's proximity, you know, but so what we did there is we just put in the time. Part of that, maybe the reason why that would be easy is because we knew at some point it was going to end, because, you know, as soon as the school announcements were going to end, it was easy to kind of like give up some of this time, extra time that we had. So there were a lot of late nights and some, I remember going to like a late night run for churros at like 3 in the morning.
4 in the morning.
At 4 in the morning with, so like late nights, but we also used technology. We used Google Hangout wherever it was possible. So,
Yeah. And the work never ends. See here.